So you should be able to see my screen now, and hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes.
All right, so today we're going to talk about the new all-in-one, the MN15-12 AIO, as well as our Powerflo batteries and a couple accessories if we have time that integrate with all of that. So first, for those of you that are new to MidNite Solar, probably most everybody knows us, but we've got some really deep roots in this industry. We've come from way back in the days of trace engineering. You know, we've got Xantrex, Magnum, Outback, MidNite, just a lot of history here, a lot of employees from competitors that are back with us now. And yeah, probably, you know, well known for our classic charge controller and now our competitive AIO, which was, you know, designed by MidNite Solar and experienced professionals like Logan, who is on the phone with us. So if I get stuck, Logan can jump in. So you'll be listening to myself and Logan Bryce today. If you have any questions on these products, you can reach out to MidNite Solar, ask for myself, you can ask for Logan Bryce, and we will get you fixed right up. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right into the all-in-one. This is what everybody is here to hear about. This is the new inverter, the new kid on the block, and we're going to talk about a lot of its functionality. So these are the things we're going to talk about today. Its operating modes, the ability to do a remote touchscreen, true 600 volt MPPTs, you know, all the way down through here. A couple things that we don't have slide decks on, but I do want to touch on is that this unit is stackable up to 9 units. So that is a 90 kilowatt inverter with battery only and 99 point something with PV added. It does come with a 10-year warranty. It is outdoor rated IP65/NEMA 3R. So let's jump right into some of the cool modes you can run in. So Logan can add to this with the terminology that you may be familiar with the Solar, but essentially you can have like a self-consumption mode where you can install CTs that are included back in the main panel, and the unit will sell back to the main panel but never export to the grid. So you can use your excess energy if you've got big loads like water heaters or air conditioners in your main panel, and you don't want them on your backup loads panel, you can actually feed back to that main panel and power that, you know, in a self-consumption style manner, or grid last, you know, time of use, that kind of thing. Of course, off-grid, and this probably is the one that really sets us apart. We, being Logan and I, spent a lot of time working on this all-in-one to really focus on off-grid and lead-acid batteries, which we'll talk about later. So we, you know, we kind of looked at the whole market and realized that most every all-in-one on the market really kind of tailors to grid tie, if you will, and it's really not necessarily, you know, kind of off-grid is kind of left behind. And I know off-grid is a small portion of the market, but it's an important portion of MidNite Solar. So just know that you will, you do have that functionality. And then of course, selling to the grid, exporting to the grid. We definitely do that as well. I believe it's 11.4 kW selling to the grid with PV, or 10 kilowatts if you're selling just the battery. So that is, I think the 11.4 is coming in a firmware update here really quickly. It was a mistake in the app that limited you to 10,000 watts on the cell power. So that should be fixed really shortly. Can do, you know, load shedding, time of use, et cetera, and it can also be done and used as a string inverter. So you don't even really have to have the batteries if you don't want to right now. The batteries can come later. If you use it as a string inverter, you will get power out of the AC when the sun is present if the grid fails. Sort of like the SMA secure power. If you exceed that, of course, you'll overload the inverter and it shuts down, but you will have a little backup power when the sun is out if you run it in that mode. So this is something else that is a frequently asked question is, you know, you don't have a display, you don't have a touchscreen display, you don't have the programmability through the display. And that is a true statement. We have a display, but it's read-only. If you want to do a touchscreen programmable display, then we do have a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connected tablet that we will have as an option, or you can use your own tablet or your own cell phone. The reason we didn't do the display is really displays outside just degrade over time, and they're not going to hold up. It is going to be a warranty point. And really, once the thing is set up, you really shouldn't have to mess with it as far as programming. And frankly, who doesn't have a smartphone today? That's kind of one of the other deciding factors. But if you look at, you know, historically, a touchscreen display just really isn't meant to be outside in the weather and the sun. And not that we want you to put the inverter directly in the sun, but it will degrade over time and it will be a failure point. So if you are looking for something, you can have the Bluetooth tablet that we will offer. The neat thing about that is, like, if you have it like in your kitchen, for example, so you can see what your system's doing, and you decide to go on vacation, you can actually grab the tablet, throw it in your suitcase, take it with you, and it's going to connect through the system via Wi-Fi. Now, that is coming in the future. We currently don't have the cloud-based function of the app working just yet, but that is a very near future upgrade. And Logan, do you have any kind of timeline on that? Is that weeks, months?
Yeah, I'd say, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I am currently in beta test with that myself. I'm anticipating, if there's no issues within the next 2 weeks, that will drop to both the Android marketplace and the Apple Store.
Okay, perfect. So yeah,
within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. So once that happens, you can update your app, you can get this tablet, and like I said, you could literally take it with you. And really, you can pick up a tablet at Walmart or anything and use that as a display as well. So you're really not boxed into, having to use your own cell phone if you don't want to use your cell phone. But again, who doesn't have a cell phone in today's world? So here's something that really does set us apart, and I wanted to spend some time on this. If you've looked at other all-in-ones on the market, most of them really, they're not a true 600 volt MPPT. A lot of them are very low, 450 to 500 volts, and a lot of those that are low are also high on the other side of that. The MPPT window is fairly narrow, making it kind of difficult to design strings, if you will, especially with today's modules. We're starting to get up to, in the mid 50 volt range for VOC. Those are big steps. So, you're very limited in some of those. But on the all-in-one, our all-in-one, you have a very wide window. It will MPPT all the way down to 70 volts. We don't recommend you design down there on purpose because it is a little less efficient at 70 volts. But, if you can have a string of 200 volts, 250 volts, all the way up to 600 volts, this will track that, and it's a very wide window, so that's pretty cool. It is sun spec compliant for a rapid shutdown, so there is a AP Smart transmitter built in internally, and is a 2-wire input for you for an external switch to initiate rapid shutdown. When you initiate that shutdown, you will actually turn the inverter off as well, so you lose AC output, and you disable the PV array, and that will work with any sun spec compliant string level or module level shutdown device, like the AP Smart or the other ones on the market. We do have our own string level shutdown. I put in here that it was UL 3741. I'm not 100% confident in that right now based on some conversations I've had. I need to get to the bottom of that. So give us an email on that if you can do string level. But if you need module level, AP Smart works really well. The 3 MPPTs, MPPT1 is a little bit more powerful. You can put up to 30 amps into that, up to 22 amps in the other two, and you can put a total of 15,000 watts of PV into the unit. And then, of course, you only get about 80% of that of your nameplate, and it will utilize 11,400 watts of that to sell to the grid or run loads or etc. The startup voltage, as I mentioned earlier, is 90 volts. Again, I would recommend around 200 volts just for maximum performance, but it will track all the way down to 90 volts. And it is safe to overdrive it. So if you're in an off-grid situation where, hey, you got PV is inexpensive and you want to really pile it on this thing, so on cloudy days you can still maximize your harvest, you can certainly do that. We advertise up to 200% overdriving on the PV. That will simply current limit on sunny days, no harm, no foul. All the typical, arc fault, insulation fault, ground fault built in like you are used to on most of the all-in-ones. So all of that is included, no extra stuff to buy when it comes to that. And it does have a built-in PV disconnect on the side of it. And, when you're getting ready to call in for tech support and figure out why it's not charging, make sure that's turned on. There's a funny story there. One of our tech support guys bugged Logan for about a week because his wouldn't work. Turns out his disconnect was off. He didn't see it over on the side and forgot to turn it on. Is it plugged in is always the first question, right? So we talked about the AP Smart Transmitter, the PV window. Really, you know, at the end of the day, that's really the big set apart for us, is that the window is so wide, and it does go all the way up to 600 volts. So here's another fun topic that we talk about a lot, and the one has a true 100 amp pass-through. And we use magnetic hydraulic breakers from CBI, like you guys are all familiar with what we use on all of our other products. So what that means for you is that you could actually feed this with 125 amps from your main panel and use all 100 amps if you wanted to. Why didn't we go for 200 amp pass-through? This is probably the $1 million question that I answer 3 or 4 times a day, and I bet Logan does too. And really it come down to, for us, we feel like a 200 amp pass-through on a 10 to 12 kilowatt inverter is a recipe for disaster. We feel that that's, you know, going to create callbacks. You're going to have issues. For example, if the customer backs up their whole 200 amp load center and central AC is on and the grid fails and you overload the inverter and it shuts down, they're at work, their refrigerator thaws out, all their stuff spoils and they're mad at you. Or the, you know, even if it does stay on, that AC is running and it drains the batteries almost instantly. So really, you know, for proper design, for, you know, offering your customer a really nice system that's balanced, a critical loads panel is pretty much necessary to really set up a system that isn't going to be riddled of callbacks or, you know, overloads, battery drainage, you know, etc. Now, one thing we did do to kind of set ourselves a little bit apart and offer you some flexibility is we did add a bunch of smart breakers internally that we will talk about here in a little bit that allow you to do things like load shed on grid failure or load shed on, you know, state of charge of the battery. Those are great for on-grid or off-grid. If you're an off-grid application, you can put an electric water heater in one that turns on anytime the battery is above 95%, for example. A lot of functionality there. And if you're doing a minimal backup to a house, you may not even need a sub panel. You may be able to use, there's 4 load breakers on the left that are 120 volt, and then there's 3 240 volt breakers. And we'll talk about those. I shouldn't get too far off track. But really, at the end of the day, backing up a whole 200 amp panel with a 10 to 12 kilowatt inverter, in our opinion, is just a recipe for, you know, callbacks and failure. So that's one of the reasons. There is a great write-up that Robin did on the website. We can share that with you. It's about 5 pages long, so I did not put it in the presentation because I didn't want you guys to fall asleep listening to me read. So here's those 3 programmable load breakers I just talked about. So you can see the picture there. The orange handle breakers are your AC in and your AC out. 100 amps in, 100 amps out. The 4 very left white handle breakers are the small 120 volt load circuits. Those are just always on anytime the inverter is on. So anytime the inverter is making AC out, those 4 are powered. The next 3 2-pole breakers of white handles are the smart breakers that can do lots of different things. There's a 60 amp one that is a generator input or a smart load. There's a 50 amp breaker that is a AC coupling breaker or a smart load. And then there's a 30 amp that is just a smart load or opportunity load breaker. The AC coupling, you don't necessarily need to use the 50 amp breaker. If you enable AC coupling in the all-in-one, it will frequency shift. So the 50 amp breaker is kind of a belt and suspenders, if you will, or if you have an older inverter that doesn't, you know, curtail, you can plug it into that. Or if you're just worried that maybe frequency shift isn't enough and you want the double, you know, redundancy, you can certainly do that. So the AC coupled inverter could go into your backup loads panel and you enable AC coupling, or it can go into that 50 amp breaker and it'll open the relay and disconnect it when the battery reaches its target. And we talked about the 4 additional breakers. There are 3 15 amp circuits and 1 20 amp circuit that are, again, not programmable, but they are backed up. So if you had a house that had 3 or 4 circuits, 5 circuits, you could use the breakers that are right in the box and not even have to install a critical loads panel. It's also kind of cool, like you could set up a car charger to come on above a certain percentage state of charge. Just a lot of possibilities with the smart breakers in there. So certifications, this is one it's kind of boring, but we are UL 1741 SB, IEEE 1547. We are HECO SRD, CSA C22.2, UL 1699B. The big one is the UL 9540 with the MNPowerflo battery, so you do have a listed system that way. We are certified in Puerto Rico, and we are on the California CEC list, and we are working on getting on the utility lists in California. So for those of you that are in California, yes, I did just find out the other day that we have to be on their list as well, because they don't just copy the CEC for whatever reason. So we are working on that. If there's any lists that we're not on that we need to be on for your local utility or something like that, just reach out to Logan or I. The number's there on the bottom of every slide, or you can holler at your contact at NAS and they can get a hold of us, but we'll definitely work to that. So we touched a little bit on monitoring, but right now it is local only through Bluetooth. The app connects to the inverter. The Bluetooth is in the inverter. So if you are concerned about your data going out over the internet or anything like that, you can leave the Wi-Fi dongle completely removed, and you can still connect your cell phone or your tablet to the inverter through Bluetooth and make all your changes, see all your stuff you want to see. But if you want to see it over the web, as we talked about it a little bit ago, when that firmware is pushed, you will need the Wi-Fi dongle on the side of the unit, and that is Wi-Fi and LAN in a single dongle. So if you're at a spot where you can plug into your network, into a switch or a router, you can certainly hardwire that. If you're in a spot where Wi-Fi is better, then you can connect to your Wi-Fi. Just a kind of a note of caution, if you will, if you're mounting this thing outside and you've got any distance to go for Ethernet, for your LAN cable, I would recommend going Wi-Fi if possible, just especially if you're in a lightning prone area. Long Ethernet cables love to pick up lightning and cause lots of problems, so that's just something to keep in mind. But some of the cool things about our monitoring is the refresh rate. You're getting about a 4 to 5 second refresh rate on the phone app when you're connected to it via Bluetooth. So when you're sitting in front of the unit, instead of waiting or swiping to get it to refresh, it just automatically refreshes every 5 seconds and lets you really see what's going on. The connection through the cloud, through Wi-Fi, they've got that down to 10 seconds update for refresh now, which is pretty amazing when you think about where it's got to go to get back to your inverter. So that's kind of cool. We mentioned that you can connect via cloud or Bluetooth, and this is just kind of an example of what the display looks like. There are a lot of updates happening to the app as we speak, and that will, of course, look a little different as we move on. And we talked about the optional Bluetooth remote touchscreen display. So I'm still a little unclear. We have two models of that. One was developed mostly for some of our Amish customers who don't have technology, and that tablet is stripped down to the point where all it does is turn on and connect to the inverter. There is no other possibility to browse YouTube or anything like that. And then there's the regular tablet that will do everything. And I believe we're going to offer both, aren't we, Logan?
That is correct. Both will be offered.
All right, cool. Another nice thing about the app is that you do get all of the MNPowerflo battery stats, programming, and updating into the same app. So if you need to update the BMS software in your MidNite Powerflo battery, for example, you'd simply do it right through the app. No computers, no cables, no other stuff to deal with. Easy to do. All right, so I've gotten a few questions about how do we compare to other competitors, maybe in particular like a Solar or something like that. And this is probably hands down the one biggest thing that sets us way apart, and that is the surge rating of this thing, the ability for it to start loads. It's kind of incredible. It's kind of in keeping with our Rosie and what we do here at MidNite, but we worked extremely hard to get this thing to just absolutely kick butt when it comes to surge. And on top of that, it is probably one of the cleanest stable outputs I've seen in an inverter. So it's really easy to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart and buy some LED lights, 120 volt screw-in LED lights, and some of those are really inexpensive and cause a lot of flicker with certain inverters. And that just seems to be almost non-existent with this inverter. It is probably, like I said, hands down, one of the cleanest waveforms I've seen, even with inductive loads and everything else hitting it. But the surge capability is nothing to be sneezed at either. It will surge about 13,000 watts per leg, and it will surge about 20,000 watts overall. So those of you that have played with like a Solar 12K and you've plugged in your DeWalt chop saw and you pull the trigger and the inverter shuts off on overload, you won't see that here. This definitely is a robust machine when it comes to that. It's extremely tolerant of that load imbalance on a single leg. And we have some videos that customers have done on surge testing already that we can share, but it is just it's pretty crazy what it can do for surge capability when you look at all the other all-in-ones out there. The voltage output, 120/240 split phase or 208 three-phase. So, and Logan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you can do 120/208 two legs of three-phase with a single unit, or you can stack 3 units for three-phase.
So it's 2 units for 208, 120, and then your traditional three-phase with 3 units.
Okay. So for 120/208 two legs, you'd use 2 units. All right.
2
Gotcha.
units, correct.
Yep. And again, just like the Rosie, seamless load transfer because it is high frequency. So instead of moving the loads through the relay like we are used to, like on a Magnum 4448, for example, we're moving the grid off and on the bus. So everything is just paralleled onto a bus instead of things going through relays where, if you've had in the past where you've had an Outback inverter or a Magnum inverter or a Snyder inverter where the relay is stuck because you're transferring big loads every time the grid fails or the generator starts. That doesn't happen on the high frequency all-in-ones or the Rosie for that matter. Standby generator connection, as we talked about earlier, there is a 60 amp 120/240 input just for the generator. If you've got a really big generator, we're running into this in some places where they've got 30, 40, 50, 60 kW gen sets. You can actually run it into the 100 amp input if you want the whole 100 amp pass through. Not really any extreme gutches there, but there is a few things you need to do. So if you're going to do that, reach out to Logan or myself and we can help you get set up to do that. But under most cases, you'd want to use a 60 amp 240 volt input. It does require a 240 volt generator. So unlike the Rosie, you cannot hook a 120 volt generator up to this and output 120/240. And that's solely because it's allowed to sell to the grid. And the UL 1741 listings do not allow you to drop a phase and stay connected. So as soon as they see that phase loss on L1 or L2, you have to disconnect. That is why it requires a 240 volt generator, just as an FYI. And we talked about, the AC coupling and the self-consumption with CTs in on or off grid. So, anything you want to add to the surge capability, Logan, that I may have missed?
No, other than the fact that testing against both Solarc and some of the other Asian branded inverters touch it. It's amazing to see just how well we do both the surge and the unbalanced operation. So, and Heather, I can't do, for some reason, I'm not able to respond in chat. So sorry about that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. So moving on, here's another one that Logan and I both worked pretty hard on, was making this thing battery agnostic. So it really is tailored to charge a lead acid battery. I don't know who uses lead acid batteries anymore, but there are a few out there still using them. And this will charge to a high enough voltage to charge a lead acid battery, equalize lead acid battery, etc. It is 210 amps of DC charging current available from the grid. And as we talked about, we really did think about off-grid. That was something that we really put a lot of thought into. Closed loop, I've gotten this question a lot. What does the all-in-one closed loop with? Of course, it'll closed loop with the MidNite batteries. It'll closed loop if anything that uses pylon protocol, anything that uses UZ. That is another protocol. And, we may add more in the future, but that's kind of it right now. But pylon is a really common protocol, and that, that pretty much covers every other thing I can think of for the most part. I did get a question on whether it would actually close loop with the Discover Battery Link 2, and I'm not able to answer that question at the moment because I have not been able to determine if the Discover Link 2 will allow it to output like a pylon protocol. But if it would, then yes, it would close loop. Of course, it will do open loop with lithium or lead acid batteries. So that is an option as well. So if you've got a system that has a lithium that doesn't have a BMS or isn't supported, you could do open loop. And we did put some effort into some other cool things with this thing that I didn't really add to a slide deck. But there's a charger setting for your regular charging. So you can tell it you want it to charge from grid or you don't want it to charge from grid. So if you're doing like a self-consumption system, you probably don't want to charge from the grid because that's expensive electricity, right? You want to wait for the sun to come out. But there's another charger function called recovery that allows you to set up some minimums, and it's kind of like from a dark start. If the battery's dead, the BMS is dead, or if you've got like your self-consumption set to drain the battery down to 30%, for example, you could set the recovery up to kick in at 20%, and you can turn the charge rate way down on that. So you could set it up to say only charge at 400 watts and kick in at 20%. So if you got a week of snow and batteries start dropping dangerously low before the BMS would open, you could trickle charge it from the grid, but not buy a whole bunch of expensive electricity to do a hard charge like you would. And there's also a force charge button. So if you're got a storm coming, there's a hurricane coming, or a bad blizzard, you can open up the app and quickly just hit the force charge button, and that will, if the grid or the generator is present, that will do a complete full charge and fill the batteries. So a couple neat features like that to try to make life a little easier and more flexible. We did put all the absorb timers in there for a lead acid battery. So unlike some of our competition, we allow you to properly program it for that lead acid. And the minimum voltage is 40 volts and the maximum voltage is 64 volts. So as you can see, we can certainly go high enough to equalize a lead acid battery, which is another nice feature. Temperature compensation, the battery temperature sensor is not included, but it does use a standard MidNite battery temperature sensor, so that will be right in stock. And you would only use that for lead acid, of course. So pure grid tie, battery backup, whatever you want to do with this off grid. One of the neat things about the all-in-one is that it is powered from all of its inputs. So as I said earlier, it does not need batteries. It will power up from the PV. It will power up from the grid or the generator. So if your battery is completely dead, you do have dead battery boot, and it will actually, light up and turn the BMS back on and start charging. So that's kind of a nice feature. We talked about it working with no batteries, so you can add batteries later or add them now, depending on what you want to do. So here's another function. This is Logan's baby, actually. If you've done a solar arc, you know that you have to drill all the holes in the gutter, and then you have to get all the conduits and all the bush adapters to get the solar arc stacked onto the gutter. So one thing Logan spent a lot of time on with engineering is getting this thing to set directly on the gutter. So there is no conduit necessary. We actually include the template too. We don't make you buy it from somebody. We include a stick-on template that you can stick right on your gutter, poke your holes in the gutter, and then we include all the snap-in bushings. So when you set that on the gutter, you snap the bushings in and you're ready to go. And you can see in the picture there, I think, and we're going to get better pictures as we go forward with these slide decks. So these pictures are, you guys are getting the first run of this, so that's why we're using what we're using. But you can see under the door there's about a 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch gap, and that door opens and closes just fine, sitting right on the gutter. So that's another thing that does set us apart, another nice feature. Just a lot of things that we put into this. When they came to us, came to Logan and I and said, hey, how can we make this thing better? We just gave them a whole laundry list of what we didn't like about all the other inverters, and we all went to work. So I threw a couple Rosie slides in here only because the Rosie now does closed loop with the MidNite battery as well. I think you guys all know the Rosie well, but it's 7,000 watts, 12240, 48 volt battery, surges to about 20 kilowatts, yada, yada, yada. It does not sell to the grid, but it does do self-consumption. Has a 120 amp battery charger. It does weigh 42 pounds. And I don't want to dwell on that because I know I'm going to keep you guys a long time today anyways, but the Rosie is about 35 watts of idle power. The all-in-one, which I didn't tell you during its slide deck, but it's about 80-ish watts idle power for everything, all 3 MPPTs and the 10 kilowatt inverter.
Yeah, and that's dependent upon, Ryan, if we have smart loads. If you have some smart loads turned on and stuff where it boots with smart loads up, you can get up
Yep.
to 90. So we're comparable with the other all-in-ones. When people talk about that, the idle load, you just got to remember nothing is free in life. So when you have your MPPTs integrated into the unit, smart loads and communication, all that stuff does have a power overhead. So the days of 30 or 40 watts on traditional inverters is kind of gone, just due to the fact we are doing all-in-ones. So
Yeah, and that's a very valid point. Like every smart load has an internal relay, and those relays have coils. There's a cost to everything, right? So the more you do, the more it's going to have for an idle consumption. So why did we decide to make batteries? And this is basically, we saw an opportunity to bring a high quality battery to the market. We also saw that you really need a system, right? Like if you use a Pites or an EG4 and a MidNite inverter, and you're having issues, who do you call? Like you call Logan, and Logan's like, well, I think the battery's BMS is doing something weird. It's on their end. You call Pites, and they're like, well, we think it's MidNite. You need to talk to them. So this just puts it all under one roof. It's a single app, single spot to monitor everything, single spot for everything, single spot for support. So when you have a concern or a question, you pick up the phone and you call and get one of our team, and we can help you out with that. And probably more importantly is the fact that we can get a 9540 listing as a true ESS with everything. So that was probably the biggest determining factors that said, hey, we should partner with somebody, and we should put a battery out that we feel good about and is high quality. I saw a post on a forum this morning I was reading that said, hey, I think MidNite is like one of the only companies that says they use EVE cells, and they actually tell you whose cells they use, and that is one of the grade A cells. And a lot of the companies don't. The BMS is changeable in these. The cells are welded in, but we'll go through these and talk about them. They both do closed loop with the All-in-One, and they both do closed loop with the Rosie. I think I have all of the protocols and everything in here, so let's just run through the slides. So our MNPowerflo5, which is of course lithium iron phosphate, don't want to leave that out. It is 5.12 kilowatt hours, 51.2 volt nominal, just like you're used to with most of the other server racks. It is a 3U generic size, so it will fit in almost every rack that uses, that holds 3U batteries. We are going to work on our own rack, our own enclosure. That will probably come Q1 of 25. Be like a lockable enclosure that you can put these in, but for now they will fit in others' racks. You can stack up to 16 of these batteries with communications. They are auto addressing, which is another nice feature. There's no dip switches, no books to read to try to figure it out. Plug them all together and they just see each other and work. They do come with a 10-year warranty and a 15-year design life. So we are pretty confident in these, and as I mentioned, we do use EVE A+ grade cells, so just a nice all-around server rack battery. The other thing, they do come with the pieces to stack, so you do not need an actual rack if you don't want a rack. You can see the hardware there on the side, so they do stack like that. Is there a limit to how many tall you can go, Logan, with those racks?
if you're brave enough, you can do 16. It's pretty stable, but it is pretty tall.
Okay, all right. So no limit that we assign. It's all using your own common sense. Gotcha. One thing we did on these batteries is we did away with Amphenol style connectors, and we went to a stud and a nut. So just like most of our equipment that you're familiar with, you make your own battery cables or buy your own battery cables, and you can take the nut off, put the cable on, tighten the nut down, you're good to go. Just a nice high quality connection, taking that other connection out of the equation. Let's see, we talked about them auto addressing. So everything comes default to the MidNite protocol as well. So if you buy an all-in-one and you buy some of our batteries, you plug them in, they just work. There's nothing else that you have to worry about. If you want to switch it to, like, talk to a pylon battery, for example, then you just open up the app and you switch that on the all-in-one. But right out of the box, they're all set up to talk to each other. No programming needed. And that's a question I get a lot. Is like closed loop or open loop. I've got a question here that wanted to know will these batteries work with my Magnum 4448 PAE? And they absolutely will. On the Magnum, you'll need to do what we call open loop, where you program the Magnum correctly for absorb voltage, absorb time, and float voltage. If you're doing closed loop, of course, you don't need to do that programming, but the Magnum doesn't have the ability to do that closed loop. But like the Snyder XW series and SW series does, they have their Insight Home and Insight Commercial, I think it is, and they both allow you to do closed loop. You would set them for pylon, and then they would close loop with these batteries. So, you know, that's kind of it. Most of the inverters now have some way to do closed loop, but some like Magnum still do not. So it's just going to depend on a case-by-case basis. But as I mentioned, they do closed loop with anything that can do pylon. So, you know, Solarc, Victron, any of those, kind of nice. And then if you're using the all-in-one, of course, you get the individual battery monitoring on the MidNite Pro app and the remote BMS firmware upgrades using the MidNite all-in-one inverter. So no longer having to deal with, you know, cables and computers. So some quick specs, you know, I was asked how we stack up against Pites, and Pites has a couple different server rack batteries. From what I can tell at a quick glance, one is heated and one is not. Our server rack batteries are not heated as well. All the specs seem pretty similar. Other than that, as far as, you know, your discharge and charge and your temperature ranges and all of that. And again, it's most of the server rack batteries are going to have all the same specs because they mostly all use the same cells. So nominal charge and discharge current, we recommend about 75 amps per battery. The max discharge is 100 amps per battery. Life cycles, 6,000 cycles at 77 degrees. And you can see the operating voltage window there of 46.4 up to 57.6. Operating temperatures 32 to 122 degrees because they are not heated. We do allow discharging down to, I believe, -4 Fahrenheit. Am I correct on that, Logan?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
For
So
discharge only.
Yeah, discharge only. Indoor rated only, and as mentioned, UL 1973, 9540A, and 9540. They are stackable, and I told you locking cabinets coming Q1 of 2025, so keep bugging Logan if you need one of those. And then our wall mount or floor mount. You can set it on the floor, you can hang it on the wall. It is a little over a couple hundred pounds, so you could probably want a friend to help you pick it up. Again, lithium iron phosphate, 16.08 kilowatt hours, 51.2 volt nominal, pretty typical there. Again, we use the grade A EVE cells and 20-year design life with a 15-year warranty on this. Probably the biggest difference between this is designed for all of the requirements to fit all the needs for like California and everywhere else, where it does have the fire suppression internally that's required. It is heated for cold environments. It is outdoor rated. Again, with all stuff that we say is outdoor rated, we really don't recommend putting it on the south side of the building and letting the sun beat right on it, of course. But, you know, it is outdoor rated and heated for cold weather, as we mentioned. Stackable up to 16 units. Same sort of scenario as with the server rack battery. It automatically assigns addresses, no dip switches. Automatically identifies with the MidNite all-in-one, so no programming needed. Also has these studs to connect your battery cable to it, like the server rack battery. They're just inside the package where, you know, they don't get wet. And all the same BMS protocols that we just talked about, and all the same updating functionality we just talked about, where you can update it through the all-in-one instead of connecting a computer to it. So the specs on this thing. Oh.
Yeah, Heather, I still can't chat. Sorry about that, Ryan.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, and we'll make ourselves available for all the questions you want to ask, and if this runs too long, we can always, you know, you can always reach out to Logan and I offline. Nominal discharge current's 160 amps, charge current's 160 amps. The maximum is 210 per battery. Life cycle's about 8,000 cycles, and same voltage range. The difference on this one is its operating temperature is -4 to 122 because it is heated. So you can charge and discharge this all the way down to -4. So real quickly, I'm not going to go over the specs of these. Just know that if you need a combiner box to combine these batteries to go to these, for now, we have our LBC or LBC 250. These are both nice if you're using a single inverter. And then we move up into the 500, the 1000, and even the 2000 if you're doing large systems, like the guy that wanted to do 9 inverters. So just know they're there. Reach out to Nas if you got any questions on combiners, or MidNite if you got any questions, and we've got you there. The other thing that I didn't mention in here is surge arresters, SPDs. I get that asked a lot. Do you need to add those? And we always recommend external surge suppression on every input and output of an inverter. Doesn't matter if it's ours or somebody else's. If you've got a product that you spent, any kind of money on, we recommend surge suppression. So if you need help with that, give us a shout. What did I miss, Logan?
Yeah, in regards to the surge suppression, on the inverter, we actually have MOVs installed for both the PV and for the AC side that are easily replaceable boards if they pop and get hit. But as with anything, more is better when it comes to lightning protection and/or surge protection, and AKA EMP, depending on how you want to talk about it. So it is included with the inverter, but external is always good also.
All right, I got a couple questions I'll go through real quick and then pass it back over to Heather for the Q&A. I did have one question about a current install that's using a Singanier power inverter. Want to know if the all-in-one would drop right in and replace that. And from my research, that has a maximum of 250 volts on the MPPT. So the 315 watt modules you have with that would just need to be restrung to a higher voltage, most likely. That probably now running is 2 strings of 3 is my guess. Other than that, it should be a drop-in replacement. I was asked about comparing against a Solar 12K, and we touched on a few things in here, but some of the big differences is we're 10 kilowatts continuous out of the battery. The Solar is 8,000. We have 3 MPPTs, they have 2. Our MPPT, of course, is true 600 volts and goes all the way down to 70 volts. We have 3 smart loads, they have 1. The additional load panel with the 4 breakers we talked about, the direct to gutter, but probably the biggest one is just the extreme surge capability, especially on an imbalanced surge on leg 1 or leg 2. That is probably, by far one of the biggest ones. And I mentioned direct to gutter. Yeah.
I can add to that also. They claim a 9 kW output on the 12K. And I would say that's only if you live in Canada or Alaska and there's no heat around. It does substantially degrade at 9 kW. If there's any kind of heat, it will derate. So that was an incremental change on the 12K. It started out as 8K. They bumped it to 9K. But if you're in Texas or Florida, I would say your mileage may vary on that. So take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Some of you may have talked to our tech support guy in Florida, Jim Parrish. He lives Tarpon Springs down around Tampa. Gets a little warm there. His all-in-one is in his garage, so it's not in the sun, but it's out in the ambient temperature, and it's running flat out with about 15,000 watts of PV on it, and it's been selling to the grid continuously for, well, almost a year now, at 10,000 watts, and it never derates. He's quite impressed with that. So that's something to keep in mind. Got a couple questions about what changes are required to switch from lithium batteries to AGMs or vice versa. I've seen that question go both ways today. It's going to depend on what product you have. If it's the all-in-one, you log into the app, you change the battery type from lead acid to open loop lithium or closed loop lithium, depending on what you're going. If it's a classic, like the other question I saw, the big thing really, if you're going to lithium, is to disable temperature compensation. If you're going away from lithium to a lead acid, you have to enable temperature compensation. But that's kind of a loaded question in general, because it does depend on the product that you're actually using. The biggest things really are your charging set points, your charging times, and temperature compensation. But definitely reach out to us on that. I think that's it. I did have a question that asked about stacking 9 units for 3-phase using independent batteries for all 9 inverters, so somewhere around 100 and something batteries. I'm going to say that your best bet would be to reach out to Logan, Bryce, or myself. The phone number is right there on the screen. Ask for one of us, and let's talk about that offline, because that's a large system. We want to make sure we put our due diligence and time into that system and not, rush you an answer. I think that's all the questions I have in front of me.
I'm going to go ahead and have you guys take a scan. We're having a lot of questions about bus bars in the chat. If someone wants to take a look and just orally answer those. And then if you're in the webinar and you have a question you want to ask of the team and you want me to turn your mic on, just raise your hand, use the raise hand button at the top, and I will turn your mic on so you can ask a question.
So, okay, bus bars for the Powerflo 5K, not at the moment. Like I said, we will be releasing a cabinet Q1 of 2025, and that will have the bus bars in the cabinet.
And then right above there, there's a question about the 16K and temps.
Yep. Yeah, so does the heater come on anytime the temps are close to 32 degrees? Does it need any input charging source to start heating or shut off? I'm going to defer that one to Logan. Does the heater just run based on temperature only, or does it care if there's charging or discharging?
It's temperature activated.
Okay, so basically anytime the battery falls below around 32, that heater is going to come on, and when it goes back above, it'll shut off.
That's correct, because you got to think about it like this. It's a small heater, so you need to build that thermal mass within the battery, and that way the battery will be available. To do it the other way, you would have to have a very large heater, and that draws a lot of current, so whole nother issue.
There's a question about an 8x8 gutter. You cannot use all the knockouts, and that is true. You do need a 10x10 as a minimum if you want to use all the knockouts.
Yeah, I use a 12x12, but a 10x10 will work it. It would just be right at the edge of the front door then. And so your knockouts will be right next to where the curve is for the bend of the gutter.
And do both batteries have active balancing, Logan, or just the wall mount?
Only the wall mount has active balancing. The 5K does not.
Okay, so it's passive balance. And there is a question asking, what cell level testing did the batteries pass? Level 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I didn't
but
know.
I can tell you that in order to have the warranty that we have, we're not using anything but A+ top of the line cells. Yep.
And we didn't touch on it in the presentation, but we do have a question about field serviceable, and it is absolutely field serviceable. We'll have a couple of videos coming out soon, and we will have a stock of parts very soon that we can, then have available. So you don't actually have to even take the unit off the wall if you have to repair it. Logan's had one completely apart. We've had a couple other have them completely apart. Everything's very well labeled, pretty simple to do.
Pretty much you can do it with an 11-in-1. The only drawback would be a lot of screws. If you're an iFixit kind of guy, scale of 1 to 10, it's probably a 6.5 to 7, just due to the number of screws that you have. The batteries themselves, the cells are not replaceable, but the BMS and related electronics are replaceable, and we will stock additional BMSs for those that want to store those for any upcoming issues that you think might happen in the world.
Yep. We get a question about how long at max surge level, and that is really set by UL, the new UL 1741 standards. I believe it's 5 seconds that you're allowed to do any amount, and then you're allowed to do 110% indefinitely, and I think there's a 15-minute level there. We can get those numbers. I don't have them right off the top of my head. I don't know if Logan does.
No.
All right, we've got a raised hand here, so I'm going to turn Dan's mic on so that you're going to have to unmute yourself, Dan, and then you can ask your question. Your mic is enabled.
As they say in the ad, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Ryan, the reason for the question on the cell level testing, you guys already know I'm part of the UL 1741 conformance team under 1741 62109. This extends into the battery realm because the level 1 testing then mitigates issues associated with how closely you may space the batteries. It virtually eliminates most of the headaches. If it's anything other than level 1, the residential code stipulates a 36-inch minimum spacing and all these other such things. So that's going to be worthwhile, researching on your part and getting some kind of a quick answer out on that.
I can address that, Brian.
Okay.
So now I understand what you're talking about. And so these batteries have been tested for the ability to have a 12-inch spacing between the cases for the UL specification, with the exception of LA County, which requires like 4 feet. But for the 12-inch spacing, it had to undergo UL and certify with testing of the cells for each battery pack before those cells go into the pack, in order to maintain a 12-inch spacing between each 16 kW battery.
Okay, if you don't have this information very clearly stipulated in the manual, I'd encourage you to do it, because we run into a lot of inspectors that get relatively anal about this unless it's in writing from the manufacturer and stipulated in plain English that 12 inches is acceptable.
Our specifications specify 12 inches, but if we need to put in there that it has been tested for cell, whatever level testing to go with that, we can do that. But that was specifically brought up by the engineering group, that each battery is tested to ensure that they can meet that 12-inch rule.
You do need that, and in the residential code and the fire codes and some of these other ICC codes, it also stipulates the exact language that shall be present in the labeling on the product, which is a royal pain in the butt. But if that's not present, again, inspectors get very anal about it.
Some of the issues are that in California, with some of the local jurisdictions, there's no way for us to know the way those rules change all the time. If you can contact me offline exactly what that language is and needs to be, I'd be more than happy to address it.
Okay, now this is not California, it's elsewhere, but I'll reach out to you. How do I contact you?
I would love to hear it. There's always things out there that I don't know about as the rules change.
We've got the contact information is in the chat.
Yep, and it's just Logan at MidNiteSolar.com.
Got it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Dan.
Got a couple questions about the studs on the battery, if they're long enough for 2 cables, and I believe the answer to that would be yes, if you're paralleling a couple of them.
And I've got a couple questions sitting in the Q&A from people who didn't want to go on mic, so I'm just going to ask them for them. Ken would like to know, what is the AIC capability of battery breakers? Is further fusing required, e.g. T-class, under some install conditions?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and it's going to depend on the breaker. So for example, our MNE DC 250 breaker has a 50,000 amp AIC. Our 300 amp breaker that's in the Rosie E panel, MNE DC 300-80-3 PP, if I got that part number right, has like a 15,000 amp AIC. And I believe the one in the AIO is going to be of similar AIC. Logan, do you know exactly what it is?
No, I do not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the same breaker that we use in the Rosie. It's just 250 amps instead of 300. And yeah, so that's just going to depend on which breaker it is and what the battery can provide.
Cool. The next question is from Dave. When will external monitoring configuration be available?
In a couple weeks, according to Logan.
We already have that fielded and being tested, and it's going to roll out to distribution channels within the next 2 weeks. And they will be able to set up the individual accounts along with the Wi-Fi version of the app. So if everything goes right over the testing over the next week, and so far it's looking really good, it's going to happen within the next 2 weeks. There are some customers that are already testing it, and it's going well.
All right, sounds good. If you still have a question, if you dropped a question in the chat that got missed, that you still want to ask, just raise your hand and we'll get to that. Otherwise, I'm going to let Ben from our team talk for just a couple of minutes about some of the testing they've been doing, and then we will wrap this up here shortly. So if you have a question, raise your hand or just drop it fresh in the chat again and I'll read it off for you.
Hi, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I've got a question here from Jason. Your mic is allowed. Go ahead and turn. All you have to do is unmute yourself. Just need to unmute, Jason, and you'll be good.
I think he's probably asking about the question he put in the chat about the heater bringing the SOC all the way down to 0. And it wouldn't bring it all the way to 0. I don't know the percentage it shuts off at. Logan may know that.
Yeah, so the heater will maintain it down to, I believe, 5% state of charge, and then it will go. The BMS will shut down and prohibit damage from the battery. We will try to keep that battery from, lithium's not like lead acid. It won't freeze, but there are some issues with, definitely with cold weather. So you don't want to run it all the way down, but that heater will work all the way down to 5%.
Great, thank you. I couldn't figure out how to unmute. Yeah, I have a lot of unattended off-grid systems, so that's kind of concerned that it would be down and then everything would shut off when it hits, down closer to 0% state of charge.
So it is slated so it knows how to protect itself. Of course, the power for the inverter will shut down, but the battery itself will do all it can to protect itself in that cold weather.
Sure. Yeah, that wasn't my concern. I know the BMS will take care of the battery. It's just everything shutting off, due to cold weather. I'd rather the heater just turns off, at 20, 30% state of charge, and then the batteries don't just get charged. That would be fine.
I'm not sure I understand that, Jason. Was that?
Well, so that the system can still be used discharging, but not charged below 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I understand. But we also have a discharging issue too. So we can configure those with an external piece of software. And if that's something that you need to do, it can be done to adjust when that heater turns on and off with an external piece of software. So if you're in an area that needs that type of capability, it's up to you. You can go in and modify those settings within the
that'd
software.
be great. Yeah, that'd be really great. Like, is it something, like an Arduino board, or is it just some code that needs to be typed in?
It's an actual program that you can go in and make setting changes for the actual BMS. Much like a lot of manufacturers have.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, I have a couple of questions I'm going to read off from the Q&A that people have dropped in there. Thank you, Jason. From Robert, can inverter be programmed to draw less power, like a low power setting that disables some features?
Not as such, there's not like a button that you click, but you certainly can disable the smart loads and things like that to drop the idle power.
Okay, and then another one from Robert. Will the user interface via tablet work on the local network when the internet cloud connection is down? Your is 150 feet away from inverter and thinking that's too far for Bluetooth. there is a local network at the inverter.
I'm gonna say no to that because if it's not using Bluetooth, it's going through the cloud.
Alrighty, and then from Tyrone, closed loop communication with home grid.
That's going to be similar to the one I had before with the other battery. And if the home grid can be set to put out like a pylon protocol or UZ protocol, then yes, it would work. If it's its own generic protocol, then at the moment it wouldn't.
So home grid, we have not verified with home grid. We've had a couple tries at it, and I'm not saying that it won't, but currently in several tests, it's been iffy. Home grid is a little different in the way they do their BMS and closed loop.
And it looks like we just got one more from Kevin. Would you explain generator auto start functionality, i.e. quiet time, SOC based start, retries on non-start?
You want that one, Logan?
Yeah, so how many were there? Go ahead, Heather, can you start with the first one there?
It just says, would you explain generator auto start functionality?
Okay, so auto start functionality is the standard 2-wire start.
Does it do quiet time, Logan?
No, not at this time.
Okay, so that's coming in a free.
That is correct. It's on the list for, I think, not this next update, but the next update.
And if it fails to start, does it try 3 times and then give you an error that it failed to start?
It tries 1 time and fails to start.
Okay.
So generator start right now, standard 2-wire with basic functionality. It works well, but it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we're normally used to. They will be added as we move along, and both of those features are in not the next rev firmware, but the next one on that list.
All right. How does the PF16 cabinet physically interface with AIO cabinet? Conduits or through needed?
I'm not sure what that.
Right. How do you connect the all-in-one to the PowerFlo16 when it's
okay?
outside?
So we currently don't have the interface box. Maybe you're thinking like EG4's indoor battery has an adapter box that goes between the battery and the inverter. What we do have, unlike a lot of manufacturers, is we have 2-inch knockouts on the right and the left. So you can easily go from the 2-inch knockout on the 16 cabinet into a gutter or trough that the inverter is setting on currently. We are designing right now an interface cabinet will have some bus bars in it that will match the inverter directly on top of the 16K battery. But you need to remember that the 16K battery is a IP65 rated outdoor battery. So it's got a seal and a top on it and two-inch knockouts on both the right and left side.
All right. Are there plans for the AIO to have capability to interface with Solar Assistant?
Yes, that is definitely on the drawing board. Solar Assistant is currently implementing Rosie, Hawke's Bay, and Barcelona, and then we will get them to work on the all-in-one.
All righty. All right. I want to take a moment just to say thanks to MidNite Solar for putting this all together and talking to all of us about the new products that are available. I know our team is really excited about it. If you have questions about these products, you can reach out to MidNite. You can reach out to the NAS Solar Electric team. A couple of our guys have been testing out this equipment at home, running it on all sorts of things. We actually have videos that are going to be coming out soon on the testing that we've done. So keep an eye on our YouTube channel. I will be sending out the recording of the webinar today to everyone who attended and everyone who registered. So keep an eye out for that as well. I dropped the partner program information in the meeting chat. Therese is here if you want to pop and just like wave and say hello to everybody. She is there to answer any of your questions. If you're eligible for the partner program, which is a great way for businesses to have a direct contact to get that wholesale pricing. So thank you, everyone. Nas also does currently have a sale going on, so make sure keep an eye on your email for that. You should get one tomorrow with an update on that sale. Any other questions?
Reach out with any questions about that partner program.
Hey, Therese. Lots of your customers are here today, so I figured they'd at least want to see your face and say hello. So
yeah, great to have so many attending.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This was a really great webinar and really great questions from everyone. Hey, Josh, it was great to see you. If you have any further questions, just reach out and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having us, Heather.
All righty. Thank you. Bye, everyone.